Welcome to our 3 Dubs, where your favourite fanfiction stories come to life through immersive text-to-speech narration. Sit back, relax, and let the words take you on an unforgettable journey. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Chapter 4 Unravel. Present day. Steve had waited for this moment for years. He would never admit it to his friend and brother, but Sam and Bucky were right. There had been so many failed missions to capture him that Steve questioned if the FBI would ever actually catch the criminal. But they had caught their guy. Ahab finally got his whale. The only problem was, there were red flags all over this particular catch. Loki was alone, waiting in an abandoned and decrepit farm in the middle of the goddamn countryside. And he didn't put up any sort of fight when Steve had cuffed him. It was all wrong, including the most blatant red flag, the ominous alert that was also waiting for Steve, Sam and Bucky when they entered the house. It spelled out a vague doomsday scenario for the team in dramatic fashion. Sure, the note might have seemed like another one of Loki's typical games that he loved to play with his former teammates. Cat and mouse turned up to 11. Only the mouse had always gotten away. So, on the surface, the Shakespearean tone of it all definitely rang true of the criminal, always trying to show off his deviant side. But this scenario wasn't typical. Black market weapons trading, hacking and cybercrime, money laundering, drug and sex trafficking, and an assortment of other crimes were within Loki's network of corruptions. That network staffed Loki with criminal cronies who were always there to help him get away and take the fall for him in a couple of extremely close circumstances. He was a genius within the underworld of crime and had formed connections throughout the underbelly of society due to his threads of illicit activity. In the past, the FBI developed missions for Loki's arrest because someone on his tax payroll had inadvertently slipped up, causing a lead to form. Fuck-ups in the world of crime were unforgivable, often leading to death or potential leads for the FBI. So when those missions were initiated over the last several years, Loki had been on his heels because the Bureau had an advantage. But Loki had always escaped each of those situations because he was the brilliant of a criminal. This time was different though. There was no initial slip-up and no trail of breadcrumbs for Steve's team to follow. A tip had been sent in anonymously to the FBI a month ago. That information led the team to one of Loki's minions who turned on his boss, revealing a date that he knew Loki would be at this deserted farm. A plan was formed. Details were verified and information was secured, providing confidence to the FBI that this might be the actual mission to succeed. It all seemed legitimate. But now that Steve was here in this dreadful place with no one else, it all felt off. Loki was extravagant as a criminal. He was not one to hide in grime without luxury. The team had prepared for the worst as always, but this mission was easy on the surface. Easy never happened in their line of work. By the book? Sure. As expected? Often. Easy. Never. Recalling what the note said, Steve thought to himself, prepare puny agents, for our past is about to come calling. It had unsettled him 10 minutes ago when he read it. Those words only festered within Steve since then, mutating into different worst-case scenarios, and leaving him with one blaring question. What could it all mean? Loki's thickened hair glinted against the daylight when he raised his eyes from the floor. Steve stood behind him and brought him to his feet, roughly gripping his wrists to handcuff him. Sam and Bucky searched the bedroom while Steve began speaking. You have the right to remain silent. Sam and Bucky looked at each other as they saw Loki sneer Steve's words. The disdain was evident in his voice as he responded. Oh, Mr. Rogers. I think we both know that silence has never been my style. Steve let out a low breath. His patience was already being tested as Loki added, My, look at you. The beard. That dark stare. The furious breathing from your mouth. I have to say, I never took you for kinky, but I am loving the stark and brooding look from you, Rogers. Steve hardened the grip on his wrist as he shoved Loki against the wall. Anything you say can and will be used against you. Loki mocked him. You were such a good soldier boy usually. I never knew you could be rough like this, Captain. Steve had risen to the level of captain back when he was in the military, showcasing his natural leadership abilities. In the FBI, he became the leader of the team, and his closest friends and teammates called him Cap at times, showing the trust and kinship they all had with each other. He was seldom called it, especially in recent years. Loki was clearly not evoking a positive vibe by using the nickname just now. Steve knew Loki was trying to provoke him. The FBI finally had him in their custody, and something about all of this resembled a scratch that you couldn't reach, growing as an irritating distraction. After patting him down for weapons, Rogers grabbed Loki's shoulders and pushed him into the wall again, harder this time. Dust came floating out of the cracks of the wall like cigarette smoke from the impact of Loki's body. Loki laughed. Oh, who am I kidding? I always knew you were rough underneath the surface, but I never dreamed of this as Roger spoke over him in the court of law. You have the right to an attorney. Loki grinned even with his face smashed against the wall and said, You know, Tweedledee and Tweedledum should really be looking out for you more, Rogers. They should take you out. Kate, your massage take you to strip club. You were so angry and tense. So much more than when we all met each other. Rogers finished stating Loki's rights and stepped back. He let out a sigh and ran his hands through his hair as Bucky took over at holding him in place. Oh my god. Shut the fuck up, Bucky bellowed, placing the butt of his gun hard into his back. Sam turned Loki around and said, It's good to see you still so hell-bent at getting under people's skin, Loki. It's a little different though, now that you're in cuffs. Steve looked back and stepped toward him again. Let us get one thing straight here, Loki. You may think this is all part of a plan, but you shall talk right now. Just remember, rats and snakes like you never do well behind the cold steel in isolation of bars. Let that sink in a little bit. Loki leered, I do love the pet names you have for me. Rats and snakes, he let his voice linger on the word snakes for a moment and continued. You definitely have had your run-in with vermin over the years, haven to you, golden boy. Another huff in frustration. Sam. Bucky. Take him downstairs. They followed his orders and left the dusty room, escorting Loki down the steps. Rogers crouched down and rested his elbows against his knees. Scrubbing his face and beard with his hands, he took a couple of deep breaths and tried to calm himself. His emotions churned inside. If he let himself dive in, it would only be the tip of the iceberg, and his wall would start to chip away. He knew today would be difficult. He knew Loki would be as big of an ass as he always was. But this whole exercise went against the grain of his expectations more than he ever thought possible. Regardless, he didn't have the luxury to dwell on it at the moment. Rubbing his eyes, he hopped up and met his team downstairs. Let us roll out. They put Loki in the third seat in the back of the SUV, facing the hatch, and strapped him in with chains to secure him. Rogers opened the security locker and safe, and placed the evidence bag containing the letter and video camera inside. Loki smiled. Rats and snakes. Rogers, Steve groaned and slammed the back door shut before Loki had a chance to continue talking. The team moved a safe distance from the SUV to drink a bottle of water and calm their nerves before making the drive back to their plane. They would have to stomach him for 30 minutes in the car, and it was not going to be easy. Sam had a suggestion. Look, Steve, all I am saying is if you hit a bump on this road, I can position myself perfectly and my elbow will ram into the shithead's skull. Then he can be knocked out, and we'll have silence on our way back to HQ. Bucky grinned and said he may have a point. 30 minutes with him in the car is going to test all of us. It has only been 20 minutes right now, and I feel like I could sew his mouth shut. Steve heard his team's words, but he wasn't really listening to the semi-joking suggestions. He walked a couple steps away, but spoke loud enough that they could still hear him. Something seems off about this. I mean, why here? Why now? Why would he just be sitting in an abandoned house, waiting for us to arrest him, and not have any ounce of fight in him? Sam answered. Loki has never been one to fight back physically. He has always been weaker than us like that. Steve quickly corrected him. Not weaker, Sam. He is too smart for a mission like this. I don't, know. This whole thing feels wrong now that we're here. He loves games, but he has always been on the run from us. He was just waiting for us this time. I can shake this feeling like something bad is going to happen. Trying to reassure him, Bucky said, something bad for him, Steve. Remember, it is like you said, rats and snakes like him never do well when they read behind bars. And the three of us just grabbed ourselves the biggest rat the FBI has caught in years. Rats and snakes, Loki's words played over in Steve's head as he said, if he is the rat, then who is the snake? Letting out another loud groan of frustration, he finished. Come on, we need to check in with the team at HQ. They loaded back into the SUV after they called Fury, Wanda, and Banner. Their plan was to be back at the airstrip and in the sky within the hour. Steve was going to drive this time with Bucky riding shotgun and Sam in the middle seat, all facing forward. As the three agents feared, Loki was not practicing his right to be silent. Even though he was chained and couldn't move with his back facing them, his voice carried through the vehicle as he spoke. Don't you ever get sick of it all, boys? Day in and day out, you have to put up the noble fight for Lady Liberty when you really only cogs in a machine. When they spoke to Fury, the three agents agreed not to engage with Loki. The goal was clear, they had him and arrested him. Now they just had to get him back to HQ in New York. 45 minutes. Less than an hour and they would be in the plane. Should be simple, right? Loki continued. Oh, but how can I forget you have Stephen Grant Rogers leading the way. He has enough moral authority within him to shield all of you. The arrogance that you must feel that is disguised as security and pride for your beloved country, that is a trick I couldn't even perform. Loki's ability to bloviate at length was something else, but he was still met with silence as Steve shifted into gear to get the SUV turned around and back on the road. He wasn't letting up though. God, it must feel good, right? To be so honourable and so right all the time. The agent's fists and jaws were clenched in their respective positions as their patience waned. Loki laughed quietly to himself and let several seconds pass before he finished. So, you want to play the silence game? I had a different game in mind. Wonder spoke in all of their ears. Guys, do you have a gag to shut him up? Unfortunately, they didn't. In reality, most captured criminals were actually silent after being arrested, wanting to wait for an attorney. Steve started driving back down the dirt pathway as Loki went on. Sometimes I can tell if you've been beaten into submission, or if your brain's truly a puny alas. I truly am burdened with my purpose, the only one to see what is about to unravel. Do you want to pull on the string? His grandstanding had changed over the last minute from broad to deliberate. The reference to several words from the note that they read only 30 minutes earlier, puny, burdened, purpose set the agent's mind reeling. Steve slammed on the brakes, causing Loki's head to bang into his seat and all of the agent's bodies to jerk violently against their seatbelts. Rogers exited the vehicle with Sam and Bucky following. The letter. Steve was pacing as he repeated himself louder this time. The letter. It mentioned us as puny agents, him being burdened with purpose, and playing another fucking game. Something isn't right about any of this, and we all know it. God, I really hate this son of a bitch. Fury's voice came through their comms. Rogers, calm down. Loki is just trying to get into all of their heads. Bucky spoke next. Fury, I agree with Steve. Something isn't right here. His words were carefully chosen at the end, like they had a double meaning. Sam added, so, what is the double meaning? We've searched all of his networks and our sources are solid. He is not puppeteering over his goons right now. They re not here and they re not coming. Steve finished. His network of criminals aren't the one strings being pulled. Or it are. Steve, Sam, and Bucky moved quickly to the back end of the SUV and opened the hatch, coming face to face with the overly talkative Rusty. Steve spoke loudly. Where are you playing at, Loki? Forming a devilish grin, Loki answered. You want to play now? Oh, I like this. Sam took a step back and spoke to his teammates. He is not giving us anything, Steve. He is talking in circles. Bucky and Steve looked at each other and said at the same time, shit. He is wasting time. Just as that notion dawned on all three of them, they heard one's voice over comms. Guys, you need to move fast. You have a chopper coming in from the air, and 4 GPS signals from vehicles just moved off the main road. They slammed the hatch shut. The unmistakable humming overtook their hearing as they saw a black helicopter descend from the sky. The heavy wind already in the atmosphere combined with the forceful gusts from the chopper blades actually made the 3 FBI agents dig their heels in the ground next to the SUV. They could barely hear Fury cursing up a storm over the comms, but what they did hear loud and clear was, protect the fucking mission. The men shouted, yes, so right, as they saw a tunnel of dirt cascading down their only exit. 4 black SUVs were driving erratically up the path in their direction. Steve yelled at Sam and Bucky, we came here as a team, and we are leaving here together, understood? They shook their heads at him as they all drew their rifles. Steve directed himself at the helicopter with Sam and Bucky towards the SUVs. It was another one of those moments in time that moved like molasses, when hardly any amount of it passed. They felt like they were standing with rifles aimed for minutes. Only seconds actually passed. The picture before them became clear and they all lowered their guns as the chopper landed and the SUVs came to a halt right in front of them. They were all military grade. The FBI agents looked at each other in disbelief as they watched the scene unfold. Central Intelligence Agency CIA Special Agents Tony Stark and James Rhodes opened the side door from the helicopter and walked towards them. They looked over at the vehicles and National Security Agency NSA Special Agent Thor Blake exited the first SUV. Assistant Director of Homeland Security Marie Hill exited the second. Rhodes and Stark nodded at Hill and Thor as the 4 of them walked towards Steve, Sam and Bucky. Thor spoke first as the chopper blades finally quieted from the engine shutting off. Long time no see, old friends. The FBI team looked back at the other SUVs to see if anyone else would be exiting them as Thor finished. No worries, they were just backup vehicles. Never can be too careful with the cargo you have in tow in your vehicle. After the disbelief wore off, Steve stepped forward and spoke loudly. "What the hell are the four of you doing here?" Stark jumped to respond. "I could ask you the same thing, Rogers. But I am not going to waste my time with that. CIA's taking over here." Bucky responded. "You want to see about that, Stark?" As Rhodey spoke over him. "Always such a good little lapdog for the FBI and Rogers, ain't he, Barnes?" Sam answered before Bucky could respond. "Lapdog? Lapdog? That is pretty hypocritical coming from you, Rhodey. How does the CISS taste, by the way?" Thor spoke again. "Oh, my friends. I believe the NSA has equal claim on the contents of that SUV. I will be acquiring it and leaving in my SUV shortly." Stark jumped back in. "Claim contents, cargo?" "Jesus, Thor, it is good to see that your vocabulary hasn't normalized since we were all last together." Maria lifted her aviators and placed them on her head as she spoke over everyone. "Good God, you are all still a bunch of fucking children. Call your ego, Stark, because my title outranks everyone here. Homeland Security's taking over, and I will be taking the prisoner with me." Sam stepped towards her and repeated his partner's words from seconds ago. "You want to see about that?" Tony clapped his hands loudly and looked directly at Steve. "Okay, time to lay down the law. CIA's taking him. Period." Steve stepped close enough to Stark that he didn't have to yell to show he was challenging him. "The law. Something you know all too well, but disregard whenever you want in the CIA, Tony. Let me make myself clear. I will drop your ass to the ground. This is an FBI mission, and he's in our official custody. Now, do the law a favor and get out of our goddamn way." Everyone else's attention had turned to Stark and Rogers as Hill moved away and spoke in her own earpiece. Wilson and Thor, Rhodey and Barnes, Stark and Rogers. Each agent stood against the other. It wasn't that they all hated each other. Quite the contrary. They all started at the same point, long ago, and had formed what they thought were unbreakable bonds at the time. But time is a funny and fickle thing. Time can heal, but it can also erode. And their friendships and connections had eroded, leaving the stronger hurt feelings and competitive sides to surface right now. The relationships between Steve, Sam, Bucky, and their FBI team back at HQ had strengthened the longer they worked together. Outside of some of them being physical family, their bonds grew with each passing year. They worked together since the academy, all 11 of them. The growth continued without the people who were no longer on their team. Stark, Rhodes, Hill, and Thor had each moved on to their own respective agencies from the FBI. They had moved up some remarkably high like Hill, and had moved on from their past. Or so they thought. Hill came back with a stone-cold expression on her face to interrupt the tension between the old comrades. "Look, I just received notice from my boss," pointing to her earpiece. "You're not going to like it, but the higher-ups in each of our agencies all know we're here and have decided that we are to figure this out together." Here he was speaking loudly in Steve, Sam, and Bucky's ears as well, communicating the same thing through a string of expletives. Goddamn red tape and politics. "You listen up. Keep him right by your side, but you're going to have to learn how to play in the sandbox with the CIA, Homeland, and the NSA on this one. That's an order." For the direction to come across that quickly, it meant that the heads of each agency had also quickly learned of the others' involvement. Instead of admitting that none of them had any clue the others would be here today, they pushed it off on the agents who were present to figure it out. There had been enough ruffled feathers between the groups in the past 50 years, so they didn't need an entire agency civil war breaking out over this debacle. The directives were clear. Loki was on the FBI's most wanted list. The team from that agency arrived first and had officially arrested him. They would be taking the criminal back to their HQ in New York City, but the CIA, NSA, and Homeland would be going with them. Thor, Rhodey, and Stark were clearly all getting the same directives from their bosses over their earpieces. By the changing looks on their faces, they were each accepting swiftly that this brief encounter with people from their past was about to become a lot longer. Stark laughed, trying to cover up his surprise, and stepped towards Steve. Tony patted him lightly on the face. "I guess Loki isn't he the only one I am going to get reacquainted with. Rogers, one more thing. We'll be hitching a ride on that bird of yours back to HQ in New York." Hill looked at everyone and shrugged her shoulders. "Sorry, Steve." "Yes, right though. Our plane was headed back to DC and has to be there in an hour. I am guessing Thor's mode of travel, along with the CIS chopper, weren't he planning on being in New York? Looks like we'll all be riding with the FBI again." She smiled at Sam as she and Thor returned to their SUVs and took off towards the airport. Rhodey smacked Bucky on the shoulder. "Thanks so much for doing the heavy lifting here, boys. We'll catch you on the airstrip in 30 minutes. After the chopper took off, the silence was deafening between Steve, Sam, and Bucky. They looked at each other, not knowing what the hell just happened. Steve looked at his team and said, "Anyone feel like their strings were just pulled?" Recalling the other lines in the letter they found in the house, memories and reality, and past is about to come calling, they approached the SUV again. It was eerily quiet with the absence of the SUV caravan and the chopper that just flew off. The silence was even more stunning when the team got back into their own vehicle. Loki was not saying a single word now. Steve looked in the rearview mirror and saw him in the back, turning his head slightly. It was just enough that Steve could see his grin from the corner of his mouth before he turned back towards the rear of the vehicle. They were going to speak to each other in the SUV with Loki in the back, but Wanda, Banner, and Fury were speaking for them over the comms. Banner started the anonymous tip. It must have been sent to the CIA, Holman, and NSA too. Whoever orchestrated it knew our agencies don't always play well with each other and don't necessarily share information freely. Wanda quickly added, yeah, and they had to know the connections we all shared with each other and with Loki. I mean, this whole operation, this is what our team does, so of course we would all be involved. But whoever they are also knew that Maria, Thor, Tony, and Rhodey wouldn't be able to resist the temptation to bring their FBI friend-turned-criminal in, that each one of them would all see to being personally assigned to this case. The stoic faces that Steve, Bucky, and Sam displayed during their drive hid their feelings surging underneath their expressions. Furious voice spoke last. Look, I know what everyone is thinking. That somehow the man chained up in the back somehow orchestrated this whole thing. But we are the FBI, we follow facts. Whoever started this is not clear yet. What is very clear is Loki is trying to use our past and any baggage or weaknesses against us while he is here. So, the thing that we can trust, the only thing that we can trust, is our team and nobody else. So, whatever type of Pandora's box Loki is trying to open when he speaks, we rely on each other. Not Holman, not the NSA, and definitely not the CIA. Got it? The silence was uncertain enough and stayed that way for the remainder of their drive. Steve, Sam, and Bucky could tell that Fury had slammed the door to the lab shut and had probably stormed off to his office to throw some papers around. Steve didn't blame him. He wished he had a punching bag in front of him right now. They also noticed that Wanda and Banner thought they had turned off their comms when they hadn't. Mistakes like these weren't ever made, but apparently the events of the last hour had thrown everyone's focus into a whirlwind. Bruce said quietly, "Hey Wanda, I hate to say this, but all these idioms and grandiose statements by Loki about games and the past and memories, I don't know. It is me thinking about the one person from our past that wasn't present today." Bucky caught Steve aside by glancing sideways in the passenger seat. He was trying to telepathically communicate with his wife to turn off the earpieces. He knew that wasn't going to happen. If Wanda could see him, sure, but she couldn't. But he was also trying to communicate with Steve to not read into this and to stop thinking whatever he is thinking. If Steve looked over at him, Bucky could maybe get through to him. But his efforts were null and void. He saw Steve's jaw twitch, his Adam's apple move with a couple of heavy gulps, and his knuckles whiten with his tightening grip on the steering wheel. Bucky also told himself that he agreed with his wife as he heard her speak to Banner. "Yeah, Bruce, I have the same feeling. 12 years ago. Day one was in the books. Everyone had gone off to enjoy their nights. After dinner, everyone hung around the fire pit for most of the evening. Rose had officially started going by Rhodey. Everyone learned that he and Tony knew each other before coming to the academy. Jokes were through the roof on Thor and Loki's birth names, two men from different families who apparently liked names that sounded like something from Norse mythology. Wanda continued to give Bucky a hard time and Sam loved it. A good time was being had by everyone. Everyone except the one person Steve wanted to hang out with the most. Natasha wasn't there. She ran off after she took her anger out on him and sat as far away from him at dinner, trying to blend in again with a table of people he hadn't met yet. He really wanted to talk to her again though. He wasn't upset at her for how she acted toward him. On the contrary, he was confused and hoped she was feeling better. Steve saw her walking by the fire after the group had been there for over an hour. Before he tried to wave her over though, he heard Tony's voice. "Hey Red, why don't you pull up a seat and stay a while?" She stopped mid-step and looked at everyone, ending with Steve. He tried to tell her with his soft expression and smile that he would sure like it if she did. Marie joined in, "Yeah, come on, Romanoff. We could use a little more female energy to balance out the testosterone over here." Natasha was hesitant but complied and went to sit by Hill. Another hour had passed, and Natasha kept quiet for the most part, laughing and nodding along with the conversation sure. Responding with short answers to a few questions Maria asked her. Yes. Actively participating in conversations and enjoying herself. Not from what Steve could see. Natasha looked at Steve a few times throughout the night. Their eyes tried to have a silent conversation over the firelight as laughter and jokes surrounded them. A couple hours into the evening, Steve noticed he wasn't the only one eyeing Natasha. Stark kept looking in her direction more as the night went on. The last couple of times Steve caught it, Stark looked like he was about to say something to her, but Rhodey nudged him both times and shook his head at Tony. He held back from whatever he was trying to say. That is, until the end of the evening drew near. The day's activities started to wear on the group as a lull formed in the friendly conversations. Stark clapped his hands loudly, drawing all the attention to him. Steve could tell the man enjoyed the spotlight almost more than anything. He saw Rhodey put his hand over his head, almost communicating that whatever was about to happen was inevitable. So Red, what is your story? I mean, what are you? Barely 18. Where did you learn how to handle weapons like Rambo and fight like Rocky? Stark stared at her with a raised eyebrow. If Steve was being honest, he had the same questions, but it was only because he was so impressed and attracted to everything about her. But Stark was being rude right now. Natasha clearly did not want to be the center of attention, and Tony was deliberately forcing her to be the focus. Everyone felt that way because the atmosphere around the fire shifted enough to cause people to stir in their seats. The mood change could have killed the flames in front of all of them. Steve looked at her, and all he could think of when he saw her blank expression was the term fight or flight. Tony's jaw twitched. He was clearly annoyed that she wasn't going to answer him. So you were not going to answer? That is okay. I've never been one to be short on words. I mean, we all have stories, right? My dad worked at a weapons manufacturing company, ergo I know guns. Rhodey here, along with Rogers, Wilson, and Barnes, all military men. Logical conclusions can be drawn to them being knowledgeable with fighting and weapons. Ill? Hell, she had NYPD written all over her face from the moment I saw her at the hotel 2 nights ago, so no surprise she can throw a punch and cock a pistol. Though, into ultimate fighting. Loki, Banner, and Wanda. All whizzes in tech and computers and everything else that most are not great at. And why? Because they went to school in their areas of expertise. Tony, come on man, drop it, Rhodey tried to say quietly. Steve was getting pissed off now. Natasha clearly didn't want any of this, and this had passed the point of being rude right when Tony started monologuing about weapons manufacturing. Natasha finally spoke in a soft and deliberate tone. I don't really think any of that is important, Stark. I find it odd that you read grandstanding when you don't really care why I am good. Steve wasn't the only one that was pissed. Apparently, Natasha was choosing fight over flight. She speaks. Tony started, and I never used the word good, Romanoff. I said I didn't know. Let me repeat myself, where do you learn your skills? They don't seem to fit your stature. Stark had lit a fire under her. She looked like she could attack him, so she did verbally. Everyone was silent as Natasha raised her voice a little. You had hillpipers being in the NYPD, huh? Let me tell you, Stark. I had you nailed the minute I saw you. Narcissist. Chauvinist. Asshole. Stark's ego had been stoked. You nailed me, huh? Is that an accusation or a wish, Romanoff? A couple of grunts came from the group as Steve now stood up. Sam spoke first, though. Do yourself a favour, Tony, and just shut up, as Rhodey added. For the love of God, shut up. Natasha looked at Steve with anger in her eyes. Matching the heat from the fire, she responded to Tony. You just made my point for me, Stark. No, you don't care about the why. You only care that you're not as good as me. Tony stood now. No, I cared that we all trying to pass training to be in the FBI and we supposed to trust one another. So let me ask you again, Red. Where the hell did you learn moves and reflexes like that? You and May look like a spider and a cat out there today. And I tend to step on spiders when I see one. Banner, Loki, and Thor all shook their heads at him. Bucky muttered, Jesus Christ, and Wanda said, grow up. Natasha's eyes weren't the only ones that reflected anger. Steve glared at Stark. Part of it was this natural protective feeling he felt towards her that he couldn't quite explain. The bigger part was that Stark was acting like an ass and Rogers hated bullies. Steve broke his own silence. What the hell, Tony? Natasha shook Steve off as she stood up now and scoffed as she crossed her arms towards Stark. Service. Honor. Trust. These are words you should learn if you want to be in the FBI, Tony. You asked how old I was before. I may be the youngest one here at 22, yet you are the one acting like a child. Natasha finally took a breath and saw that everyone around the fire was still sitting, looking up at them. Her face didn't hide her emotions anymore. Anger, embarrassment, and that same look of exposure she had on the wrestling mat with May earlier, it was all there as she said, I am sorry for ruining the mood. Everyone. I am pretty tired, so I am going to go to bed. She walked away from the fire and a collective assortment of groans came out of the group. He'll flip Tony off, as Rhodey said. Sometimes you're such a dick, Tony. Stark sat down, still defensive, and said, "What, none of you have questions?" Steve walked around the pit and stood over Tony's side. "It is day 2, Stark. In the FBI, in case you forgot. This is in T middle school. Of course we have questions about everyone. I do say more people are questioning you tonight though. Let me tell you, you better watch it." Stark jerked his head around. "Or what, you were going to beat me up over your little crush, Rogers?" Steve laughed and said louder, "Oh, I wasn't telling you to watch it for me. I have a feeling that we all know Romanoff can handle herself just fine. No, you better watch it. Or we were all going to get front row seats to your ass beating from her." Heads nodded and a couple of voices of approval were heard from the group. Steve continued, "Look, Stark, it is day 1, so you better find a way to cool yourself off and calm your insecurities. We all have them. And thanks for listening to our 3 dubs. A huge thank you to 80s Kat for creating this incredible story. Be sure to check out their work for more amazing content. And special thanks to NC for providing the background footage that brought this narration to life. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Until next time, happy listening and keep imagining.